My name's Jacob Vernick. I'm a sales engineer here at New Blue, and welcome to Discover Captivate, a brand new webinar series from New Blue. Here is our election production right here. What I want to show next is this social reaction poll. So this is one of my favorite graphics in this collection. It is using what we call data graph variables to populate this graphic, right? So if I come over to my properties panel right here, you can see there's a bunch of information, but you can see right here, this is what we're looking for, response 1 percentage. This is what's going to say how much of this graphic I should fill up, right? So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make this smaller, and you can see that the graphic is changing as we go, right? Depending on what percentage input value we are giving it, it is going to fill that percent of your graphic, right? So if we come into the title designer, which we can do by clicking over here on edit, well, once we play our graphic off, click right there on edit, we can come in and now see what is happening, right? So you can click onto this blue bar. Oh, that's the mask. Response bar 1 right here. And we come over to motion and data. You can see that in NTX playback features, we have selected that this is a data graph variable. That is the option that tells you this is the piece of my graphic that I want to expand or contract depending on the value I've given it. This template has those values manually keyframed. So the way this works is that depending on the transition that we apply, it is going to fill up that percentage of the transition. So the transition that you apply to this graphic, and when I say transition, I mean the animation in on this graphic needs to be linear for that to work. And I'll show you what that looks like when we kind of build one from scratch in a couple of minutes. All this to say, this is our title designer. So if you haven't seen this before, this is where you can come in and build your graphics either from scratch or use our templates to build out your own custom thing. Or you can add text and you can add custom shapes, or you can come up here to file, import, and bring in your own PNG, MOV, PNG sequences, vector files, PSD files. You can add audio to them so they'll make noises as they animate on and off. All of those features available to you in the title designer, as well as things in the bold and for text, at least bold and caps and leading and kerning and all of the different pieces that you need to make your graphic do exactly what you want it to do. But what we're going to spend the rest of our time today doing is building out our own data graph variable, so I can show you that process kind of from start to finish. So what we're going to do, we've got this election comparison graphic right here, right? A yes and a no. We're just going to take two pieces of this graphic. We're going to change the data, right? Instead of just saying, hey, this is 65% and this is 28%, we're going to say, I want to show 65% on a bar graph that goes vertically and 28% on a bar graph that goes vertically, right? So we're going to just kind of build that from scratch. If there's any questions as we go, feel free to throw them in the chat. But let's do this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this graphic and I am going to duplicate it because there are elements of this that I want to use in my version of it, right? And now we're going to jump right into the title designer. The main things that I want to use, I'm going to keep this title. We'll change it a little bit later, but I like the font and the way that it's looking. But I basically want to get rid of everything else but the background. So I'm just going to come in here and highlight all these different layers right here, and then just kind of command click through the other ones that I missed real quick so that we can just delete all this. We'll keep the logo too. I just control click right here, click on delete. All right, good. And now for the people who are maybe like me, maybe not the most design conscious, well, luckily New Blue has people who know what they're doing with design, so we can take the hard work that they've already done and just start there rather than having to start from scratch and visualizing something from themselves. So now what we're going to do, we're going to start to build out these data graph variables. And the way that we can do that, I'm going to do it by adding a shape. So I'm going to add a rectangle, and I'm going to make this look kind of like a bar graph right here. So I'm going to have it start right here. I'm going to make it a little bit thinner and then drag it right down. I'm going to want to put a little bit of information on the top of it and below it. So I'm going to leave it right about here and say that this is what my bar graph is going to be. Now I'm going to Command C, Command V, and just copy and paste. And now I'm going to shift click and drag it over. Shift clicking just ensures that it stays horizontally, but I want to make sure that these are even. So the easiest way that I can do that is I can come over here to motion and data, and I can see, okay, this is at negative 40.4 from center. I want this to be the same. Actually, this is 28.3. I'm going to make this one negative 28.3. And now we know they are the same exact distance from center. Those are a little close together. Let's maybe make this like negative 35 and positive 35. Yeah, it's a little bit better. All right, so now we've got this. That's a great place to start. We've got our two rectangles. Now we need to make sure that we want to get them to be data graph variables, right? So we're going to spend the beginning of time doing that. Then we'll add on a couple of other things kind of as we go. So the way we're going to do this, the first thing we need to do, or the first thing I like to do at least, is add a transition effect. So as I mentioned earlier, this needs to be a linear transition. It needs to animate just from point A to point B. You can do that via keyframing, or you can do that via our whole library of transition effects. So if you come up into this library, you can go to transitions and then animations, and this will give you the whole library of different ways that your graphic can animate on. The ones I'm going to use right here are grow and then ascend lines. And I can just drag and drop this, put it on my project. And when I click on this down arrow, you'll see, okay, I've got this added right here. I want it to animate up to my pause point. Oops, sorry. I was getting too animated there. The pause point is where the graphic is going to play up to, as I mentioned earlier. That's where it's going to freeze on screen when I click on the play button. So it's going to animate right up to here. And now if I get a little play, I can see what it does. And you can kind of see, hopefully it's animating really quickly and from the top to the bottom, which is not what I'm looking for. So I want to change a couple of things about this. So when I click on this and I come over here to my transitions, there are a bunch of things that I can change about the transition itself to make it do what I want it to do. What I want it to do, I don't want it to grow from the center top. I actually want it to grow from the center bottom. I want it to rise up. I'm going to get rid of all this elasticity, this decay, and this fade. Again, I just want it to grow linearly. I don't want it to do anything else. And I'm going to change the smoothness to normal. What that's going to do is just make it so that it grows very linearly from bottom to top. And that is how our system knows exactly where to place the percentages in the graphic. Now, instead of having to do all that from scratch, I'm just going to copy the transition by right-clicking on it and then hitting copy transition and then pasting this transition as the endpoint to my other graphic. Last step here, I just need to say, hey, these graphics are going to be data graph variables. I can do that in the motion data tab, click on data graph variable, and I can say, hey, this is going to be called poll 1. This is going to be called poll 2. And now I have my two data graph variables. Now we're just going to add a couple of other small things. So I'm going to make some variable text here that's just going to say yes. And let's maybe quickly change the style on this. Maybe make it, we'll go 12 and bold. And then we can just drag this down to here. And then we'll do the same thing, copy and paste it. Whoa, copy, paste. We can bring this over here and have this say no. And then we could also do things like adding the percentage to the top or anything like that. One thing to know in the title designer, if you want these two things to be aligned, make sure that they're aligned. You can command click on both of them, come up here to alignment, and then say that you want to align their centers. And now it's going to be what ensures that everything is perfectly lined up. And you don't have to, there's no snapping or anything like that. So you just tell their centers to align. Now we've got our graphic. And if we hit check, well, let's make it look a little bit nicer, right? So we can double click over here on this 3D face, and let me do that. Hold on, give me one sec, bring that over to my other monitor. So we're just gonna say, hey, I want this rectangle, double click right here, and then bring it over, there we go, to be a dark blue. And then we'll just copy this and paste it onto our other one as well. Okay. Not looking too bad here. Now we can click over here on our checkbox, and we've got a data graph variable right here. So let's wait for this to render out. But you can see down here, poll 1, poll 2, we've got all that information ready to go. When I click on play, you'll see that it's set to 0, so you're not going to see anything, which is what we'd expect to see, nothing, right? So if I click right there on play, we see nothing, but as I change this value, it goes up and down. Now, this is all great, but I don't really think anybody wants to just be kind of sitting here and, dragging these things, right? What Captivate is all about is connecting this to data. So if I come over here to add source and I go to general spreadsheet, I'm going to make a new input, select file, exit poll sheet. I believe it's in my comparison questions. Click on OK. Let's take a look. Yep, this is exactly what we're looking for right here. I'll click into the spreadsheet just so you can see what we are working with. That is a different tab. We're working with this tab right here. So this is what I was talking about a little bit more with Excel formulas and stuff. Let me zoom in a little bit. I built this CSV using the generate file feature that I talked about a little bit earlier. But the real power in this is the ability to just, have these formulas. So this right here, what the data graph variable needs, and I believe I failed to say this earlier, is a value between 0 and 1. So if you're getting 75%, Captivate doesn't quite know what to do with that. Captivate needs 0.75 to understand it. So how do you make that work in your spreadsheet? Say you want to show 75%, but the data needs 0.75. Well, you would just take this, let's use C1 as an example, right? Or C2 right here as an example. We've set it to 1%. And then I've come over here and I just said this equals C2, but I formatted this cell to be a number with 2 decimal places. So we do need the data, but using the formulas that exist in all of these other powerful spreadsheet tools allow us to get what we need without you having to manually update 100 different cells anytime you want to make a change, right? So let's just change this to like 64 and 36, and you can see how my other fields are updating right there. Click on save, and now I can come over here and I name those 2 fields as a decimal 1 and as a decimal 2 just to keep things simple. And now I just drag and drop as a decimal 1, as a decimal 2, and now it's got those values right there, 36% and 64%. You can see that if I was to come into here and update my spreadsheet to say, let's make this 90 and hit save, you can see how it now goes up to 90. So all that needs to change is your data, and the graphic is going to automatically do what you've told it to do and fill X percentage of that graphic. So that is what I wanted to cover today with the data graph variables. Hopefully that makes sense. Just another tip and trick and tool in your toolbox to help you build out the custom graphics that you want to use.